Ladies and gentlemen, it is an exciting day today because we are going to be looking at 8bitdo's latest controller. And it's a direction that I've been asking them to go in for quite a while because I believe they figured out the kind of the lower end, more affordable market, and that they should take a shot at some of the more premium style controllers. And yes, that means that the pricing would be going up, but it's an area that I think they could really work their way into and even maybe innovate there. And today, that's what we're looking at, is their latest controller, that being their 8bitdo Ultimate controller. It's coming in at a price of $70, which puts it basically in direct competition with the first-party platform holder controllers with the Xbox, the Switch, and the PlayStation. But I think there are some pretty interesting features here that maybe those companies can work to adopt in the future. We'll take a look at that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video or find it helpful at all, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Also, in the interest of full disclosure, 8bitdo did send this review unit over for this video. If you want to learn more about this controller, I'll have a link to the listing down below in the description. So what we're going to be doing today is unboxing this for the first time. I have not picked this controller up at all, taken out of the box, so it'll be a lot of fun to get some immediate impressions on it. We'll plug it in and try it out with something like the Switch that it's heavily being marketed towards, and we'll attempt to also take it apart. So first of all, their 8bitdo Ultimate Bluetooth controller. There are two different controllers that have released. One is simply 2.4 gigahertz, so it'll just be like that, 2.4 and then USB. I recommend getting this Ultimate controller. It is 70 versus the 50 for the 2.4 gigahertz, but obviously having Bluetooth will open up many more possibilities when it comes to syncing this up to different systems and devices. Even though it's just being advertised for Switch and Windows, you can kind of think about different things like Android devices that you could be using this on. Now, looking at the front of it, it does look very much, as people have already said, like an Xbox controller, but I actually think it's kind of a cross between an Xbox controller and a Switch Pro controller, but we'll get to that after we unbox it a bit here, and just going over some more of the features, even down to the weight itself at 245 grams. But here we go. We'll take it out of the box, and we're greeted with another box. Now, the thing with this is it does come with the controller, but it also comes with the charging stand. The charging stand included here is something that I was really happy to see, just outright coming with the controller, because you will see, for example, these charging cradles be released separate from like the Xbox controller, which I believe Razer is doing that. And then Sony has kind of their own charging dock that you can get, but it's all extra on top of the price of the controller. And I do like these cradles that we have for different controllers, and generally I'll recommend them because it's a good place to store your controller. It does a really cool job displaying it, and it charges it. So you always have a spot to put your controller and it'll always be ready for you. Now, taking this out of here, ooh, okay, so that immediately has a higher quality feel. I mean, some of their other stuff they've done, like the SN30 Pro Plus controller, felt good. This feels solid, but it has a texture on the back. I think compare this directly to the Xbox Series. If you've used one of those controllers, it has sort of a grip on the back, and really all it is just a lot of really small dots sort of punched into the plastic, but that feels really good on the back here. We have our D-pad and then the offset sticks. The D-pad has always been pretty good for 8bitdo for the most part, and this is no different. I understand some people prefer the symmetrical sticks. I think I've just gotten used to these offset sticks overall, considering the Xbox and the Switch Pro controller use them in that orientation. Then we have A, B, X, and Y. And I mentioned it's sort of a cross between the Switch Pro controller and the Xbox controller, and with the handles, it gives off a very similar look to the Xbox controller, but you can see sort of the button placement lining up with the Switch Pro controller, and I would even say the D-pad feel lining up more with the Switch Pro controller, as opposed to having a clicky D-pad on the Xbox. But I did mention the grip, and yes, it is extremely similar. In fact, I have a feeling they basically lifted it directly off of the Xbox controller. But I have to give them credit. After just picking up the Xbox and the Switch Pro controller, this has a very high quality feel that could be confused with one of those first-party platform holder controllers. The sticks have nice tension to them, and it just has a nice solid feel to it overall. A quick look around the rest of the controller. We have our minus and plus button with a star button right in the middle there. This is our profile button, so you can set up multiple profiles in that custom Android application that we went over in a previous video with their other SN30 Pro Plus. And then we have our main home button right here to also turn it on. At the top, we do have LR and then LR and R2. These are full analog triggers, and once again, a pretty good feel to them. And what's really cool is in the custom application, you can change how much of this you have to press. As an example, to activate it, you can change the dead zones on the joystick, all kinds of stuff. And on the back, we do have 2 macro buttons here. Again, can be customized in that application to be whatever buttons you want. We have a switch here to go from Bluetooth to 2.4 gigahertz, and we have a couple of contact pads. On the bottom, we have our player indicator for player 1 through 4. And on the top, yes, of course, USB Type-C. The micro USB stuff, that's a thing of the past. We're not dealing with that anymore. We also have a indicator light here for charging and our sync button. A few other things we have in the box includes full instructions, the charging dock, and we also get a USB Type-C cable. I want to point out that there is no charging brick in here, so you will have to either grab one yourself, or you can plug this into anything really with a USB Type A plug, since you can connect it to, say you have one of those power strips that has USB to plug in. You can also plug it into your PC if you're gonna be using this as a PC specific controller, or even your console. I will admit though, I think it would be better if they just had a power brick in here, even if it was one that wasn't very powerful or anything. It doesn't need a massive power brick or anything like that. It's just odd to leave it out of their ultimate premium controller. But nonetheless, we'll take a look at their charging cradle here. And the idea with this is pretty simple. You would plug it in the back, which we have here. That would be USB-C. And you would then sit it down and the controller would just sit right on top. Also, I do like this compartment right here. It lets you store the USB 2.4 gigahertz adapter that you can plug into anything that would require that instead of Bluetooth. And you can just store it right in here if you don't need it, or if you're traveling. They also have this rubberized piece here so that when it's on the table or wherever you have it, it is not moving. So I have it all plugged in. You just sit this right here, and it sort of finds its way into position. And when it does sit down and start charging, you get this really nice kind of white indicator here lighting up. And looking at this cradle, I do think it's low profile enough to sort of blend in with a gaming setup that you may already have in a living room or something like that. And when, of course, you want to play, you just take this off here. And I noticed that it's set up sort of with the shaping and all this to where you can almost throw this at it and it'll kind of catch and land in position. So there is some thought put into the shape and the mold and all this that they've used. So I do have it in Bluetooth mode. I just turned it on here and it's already synced up. It does show the correct battery and all of this, so we're good to go on that. That was pretty much it. And you can see I was already playing Bayonetta 3, which, by the way, just came out, so it kind of dates this video a bit, but seems like a good game to jump into to see how the buttons respond. The buttons themselves feel pretty responsive. I wasn't expecting anything strange to be happening here. The interesting thing about this controller, though, is it is using Hall effect sensors for the joysticks, and the joysticks are very responsive as well, so nothing strange there. Now, the Hall effect sensors we'll be taking a look at when we get this controller apart, but the idea is it should be pretty much resistant or essentially immune to the idea of joystick drift, since we're not making full contact in order to track movement of the joysticks themselves. So you won't have the typical degrading of materials inside of the controller like we see with current controllers. I am getting some rumble here as that was happening with the cutscene, and it doesn't feel like HD rumble or advanced haptic feedbacks. I think these are pretty standard rumble motors in here. Also, this is like the first hour of the game, and it is off the wall ridiculous already. I think I'm gonna have a blast playing through Bayonetta 3. Oh, and check this out. It does wake up the Switch, but there's kind of a strange thing going on here. I'm not sure if this is something that needs to be updated through software, but I'd press the home button, right, to turn it on like normal. It blinks a bit, nothing's happening. But then I sort of pick this up and you almost move it around a little bit, give it a shake, and then it starts blinking faster. and then it turns the switch on. You have to start pressing the A button a bit for it to completely sync up. I don't really know what the deal is there, but they might want to look into that. Anyway, now that we've taken a look around the controller, I do want to see if we can take it apart. But the interesting thing is they don't have any visible screws, which is a good thing if you're trying to do a premium controller. You want it to look like it's all one piece, essentially. I'm assuming it comes apart similar to the Xbox, where these side grips have to be popped off. And yeah, just a quick move around with the spudger. We have some pretty strong clips in here. And then we have a look at some Torx screws. So I'll have to get that bit out. All right, so 6 Torx screws out, and the front lifts away. You can see the buttons stay there too, and that's because they have a separate board that's connected with a ribbon cable here. And this is a great idea because we can see this thick piece of plastic going through the middle. And what that does is it just adds some extra structural integrity to the controller. So you can't just grab it and start bending it and creaking it. It basically has like this little skeleton inside. They've now switched over to Phillips head screws for this side. Anyway, all those Phillips head screws out, we have our separate board that lifts off there. And I mostly want to take a look at the D-pad. The A, B, X, Y, it's pretty standard. Rubber membrane here, all of our buttons. That's pretty easy to take off and clean, I guess, considering it's separate from the main controller board there. But there is our typical 8bitdo D-pad. Exactly what I'm expecting with this. Pivot point in the middle. You can see it doesn't like balance directly. So this is good. It works to keep you from accidentally pressing one direction along with another. So you can only really press one direction at a time, which is exactly what you want with a good D-pad. So far, so good when it comes to the quality of the controller with that top half. I am very curious about these though, this being the Hall Effect sensor joysticks. Oh, and these are our rumble motors. Nothing fancy going on. They have one in each handle. I think the next step would be if they can get to where we have that advanced haptic feedback that's going to be in controllers going forward with the PlayStation 5 DualSense and obviously the Switch Pro controller now and most likely whatever they have next. And I'm sure Microsoft will be looking more into that. So I assume eventually third-party controllers will start to retire these. We just had 3 Phillips head screws to take out here, and then it lifts out of the back. So basically we have our main unit here, and then it's encased with 2 other pieces of plastic. We do have our macro buttons on the back here, and they're in there pretty well. They have their own screws, which is great, actually. And then we can see our connection pads here when it comes to the charging. So we'll flip this over and look at that. That's our battery right there, this big rectangular brick. I do like the extra touch of having this piece of black plastic over it, just kind of encasing it and just screwing it into the board. That way, if this gets loose on you, somehow it won't rattle around or anything. It'll already just be screwed in. But then we have our 1000 milliamp hour battery. They quote roughly 20 hours of battery life. And I mean, I think that's pretty good considering you would then throw it in the cradle. Probably, even if you played all day, you most likely won't run out of battery with your controller here. Otherwise, you just had a couple of clips on the top and bottom holding the board in. The bumpers here and the triggers, they work off of pressure from these pads onto the board itself. But now we should be able to at least get a decent look at our joysticks. The only issue is they are encased in metal and they are soldered down. So it's not like, for example, the Dreamcast controller where you can just rip it off, take a look, and then put it back down. No, these are very much locked in place, which is a shame because it'd be nice to be able to pull this joystick off, take it apart real quick and show you, but there is the chance of just outright damaging the controller then. I think what I could do is maybe contact the company that does these joysticks and see if they can just send them out like before they go on a controller and we can pull them apart. But the idea here is they're using magnets in order to track where the joystick is. If you want a better look at this, again, that Dreamcast controller video I did, I think shows it off pretty well, but that of course was it done in like 1999 or 1998 when they were working to produce the Dreamcast. This is a bit of a newer iteration of it, but essentially you don't have materials grinding against each other that can degrade over time. This is just moving magnets above certain areas, and as it is doing that, it's tracking where it is. So I assume the only thing that could really break down here, one is obviously the mechanism that it's moving in. Sure, you could get really violent with it and break it, but also That being R3 and L3, that button in there probably only has so many presses. But I think most people will tell you the joystick in current controllers will start drifting before the buttons for R3 and L3 will give out. But I have to say, with this teardown and taking a look inside, there's a lot of focus on quality and feel for this controller. And that's exactly what I wanted out of 8bitdo, because I think they've mostly figured out how to put together a good controller with a foundation. They just needed to build on top of it with features, which they've done year after year now, but then also bring everything together in a package that actually felt premium, or at least above average compared to regular controllers. And I believe that's what they've done here, and what I've seen just even from this teardown and using it for the short amount of time. This is certainly a controller where they focused more on quality, and the idea of having Hall effect joysticks in here, you can feel a bit more comfortable buying this and at least understanding you have much less of a chance when it comes to stick drift, if at all. And ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it here for the 8bitdo Ultimate Controller. It's a very good product from 8bitdo. In fact, I think we're to the position now where I would recommend this over the Switch Pro controller. There's just the feature set here, along with the more reliable joysticks with the Hall effect sensors. I'm just not sure why you wouldn't go with this one. And it comes with a cool charging cradle. And you can of course use it for things like Windows and Android, or maybe Raspberry Pi or something like that. So it just, to me, seems like 8bitdo has everything figured out here. And I mean, I have to start reaching to come up with things they can work on still. And they do listen, as you've seen with their progression of their controllers. The battery, it's soldered in. Let's make that something that's plugged in so it's easier to replace. The rumble motors, I don't know if we can move to the advanced haptic feedback motors that are obviously being adopted by first parties now. Again, it's hard because this is just a really good controller, even at the $70 price point. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.